All right, everyone. Hello and good morning to you. It's Tony Lynch, and this is another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Yes, and we're back again. We have some more amazing guests for you guys. Now, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that if it's your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over there to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And as you see on the bottom, we have changed things up a little bit. We are going live on a bunch of different platforms. So if you didn't catch it on YouTube, you can catch it on any of the other platforms that we're going live on. And I just wanted to let you guys know that this is for educational purposes only. So if you guys are struggling, we do have resources for you. Don't struggle by yourself. All right. Now, without further ado, I have another amazing guest for you guys. And Lisa's here to share her story, her work, and everything else. She's an amazing person. So if you guys have any questions, comments, please put them in the comments section. We'd be happy to answer them as we go along. Now I'm going to bring her on up here. She's already up here. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Lisa, how you doing this morning? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much, Tony.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So introduce yourself to the people where you're from.
Absolutely. My name is Lisa, and I am from Canada. And for those of you who are a little bit more familiar with Canada, I am from the province of Saskatchewan, kind of in the middle, kind of in the freezing cold north. Um, but my story, like many of you listening, is one of heartbreak and, dare I say, a little bit of resilience sprinkled in there too. We lost our daughter, Katie, who you can see just over my shoulder here. She was 17 years old. She died in a head on collision, just a regular Tuesday night, running out to do some errands, early in the evening. It actually took 6 months for the team to finish the investigation regarding her accident because there was just nothing obvious that gave them any answers, and we still don't honestly know. But that moment started, the next part of my life. I think we can all identify with the fact that our lives are now in two very distinct timelines, before and after. And yeah, all the things that come with losing a child. I'm a healthcare professional by trade. I've been doing it longer than some of your listeners have been alive, for 33 years. And, thought I knew a thing or two about grief. I had a half a page of notes at school, you guys, half a page. We learned all about that theory, the 5 stages of grief. And I work with people who unfortunately are at end of life and, all of that kind of thing. And I thought I knew something. And then grief came into my life and I realized I didn't know a thing. And just trying to get our feet underneath us as a family, learning how to be a family of 3, learning, how to navigate marriage and all the other things that go with it.
Yeah. I have a question. My we've talked. Child loss is one of those things that nothing in life prepares you for that, right? It's something that we don't think about because who thinks about losing a child? I know I did. And like you said, the before life is great, right? You know what I'm saying? We're doing all these things, we're having fun, we have plans. And then life changes. And it changes in a way where it affects everything, not just us, it affects everything, everyone around us. It affects how we move and navigate. Because I don't know, I guess for me, um, I thought to myself, like, I don't want to ever bring another child into this world because the unthinkable has happened.
Yeah.
So reality changed, and I went, I don't know if my heart can take another one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, right? But my relationships changed with people, individuals. The people that I thought that was close to me walked away, right? And it was the ones that I least expected, the ones that stayed around, right? So now my question to you, like when life changed for you, and we'll go back into the before, into the after. When life changed for you, how drastically did it change? Did your relationship with your family, friends, your kids, and everything? Because they also have to navigate this world as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I don't really have a simple answer for you because I feel like it wasn't all of a sudden.
Mm.
The people that I thought would come running to my side, if you will, did come running to my side. But then I realized that the people that I thought I could lean on, I mean, I have a very supportive family, parents, brother, and a good family dynamic that way. But I realized quickly after the funeral that they were not equipped to help me and support me the way I needed it because they were grieving too.
Right.
My brother, you know, we could spend hours talking about this, but, made all kinds of empty promises to my son. Um, and, came through on zero of them. My mom and dad actually, after 3 months, told me to kick my 15-year-old son to the curb because he was acting out. I mean, he was giving us a lot of gray hair, a lot, but that was not the support that I needed. Like you say, our situation, I felt like we became the poster child of what can happen, and people were afraid to look at us, frankly.
Right.
Even in the grocery store, we're managing to get through without being a puddle somehow. And God forbid somebody comes around the other end of the aisle and sees you. There's one of two things that happens. They either do this crazy little grocery store dance, I call it, where they're, and they turn around and they're out of there, or they become all consumed with the quinoa or something, obscure on the aisle with their back turned to you in hopes that you keep on passing because,
Yeah. Oh man.
and it comes down to I guess that's where we all discover our mask, right? Because nobody wants to hear about our stuff. So we get to be a master. You pull on your mask. How you doing, Lisa? Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear of everything that's happened. We're doing okay. We're doing the best that we can. Rather than actually saying what, my heart is broken. I can't get out of bed in the morning. My son is smoking so much pot I can hardly handle it. Yeah, we're great, but it affects everything in your life, your job, your relationships with close people. And then, like you say, Tony, there's those acquaintances, those people that bubble to the surface that are just a miracle, really,
Right.
and
Right.
just a godsend. They know the right thing to say, the right thing to do. They show up on your doorstep. So it was just, I'm going to summarize that answer as saying it was a big surprise for me on so many levels.
Hmm. Wow. And you know what? You touched on it. The people who did show up, right? You know what I'm saying? The unexpected individuals, those that came up and said, you know what? I see you. And
Mm,
they did, and they do it in a way to where you're looking at them going, "What's wrong with you? Everybody else left. Why aren't you going with them?" Right? I have a really good friend of mine. Not too many showed up, but this guy, I've known him for years. And when my son passed away, he had just had his little girl. He had just had his little girl like 2 weeks after my son passed away. Now you would think to yourself, when you have someone who has just had a baby, they're not going to be the ones that show up, right?
mm.
He showed up.
Wow.
And it was so crazy. He was calling me when he was leaving from work. Tony, what are you doing? How you doing right now? I said, man, I'm falling apart. He said, I'm on my way. And he lived way clear on the other side of town. He would call his wife, hey, I need to go over there and see Tony. And she go ahead, go. And he every day he showed up. And I tell you, I never even expected because I was like, you got a family. Go ahead and be with your family. It's
Right.
nah, man, I'm here. And what it ended up happening, I learned something later on in life after, a couple of years went by and everything. And it dawned on me that loss made me a great liar.
Right.
It made me a great liar because I was used to putting on a mask.
Hmm.
And if I can keep my chest out and keep my head back and keep my shoulders folded back and things like that, I can tell you that I'm fine.
Yeah.
And if I worked out and I ate great, And you know what I'm saying? And I looked great. It kept you from asking me how I was doing. And I got really good at it. I got really good at putting that smoke mask up.
Yeah.
And like you said, Lisa, you leave from there and deep down inside you want to tell them, no, man, my life is upside down. I'm not okay.
Mhm.
Right. But we become great liars. And I
That
hate
is
to say it that way, but it's the truth. We become great liars. And I think the reason why we do is because we don't want other individuals, for one, to have sympathy for us, right? Because we get lost into it like, I don't need your sympathy. Where was you at?
But don't you find too, like for me, I hear what you're saying, and yes, but then it became double the work, not just to hold myself together, but then now I've got to console this person who's all upset and, blah, 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 doesn't know what to say and then crying. And so it took double my energy. It was easier to say I was okay and wear the mask, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, it
and
is double the work, right? You know what I'm saying? Because you, as being a mother, right?
Mhm.
Naturally, you're a caregiver, and so when you see others that are in pain, we tend to push aside what we're going through because instinctively we want to make sure that you're okay. Whereas in reality, we should have been selfish. We should have said, no, I can't take care of you right now.
Mhm.
I have to take care of me because if I don't take care of me, I'm not going to be okay.
That's right.
So we don't prioritize ourselves. So
Oh,
yes, and I totally agree. It's double the work, totally double the work.
yeah.
And but we have to pat ourselves on the back too, because in the midst of all of these things, we still found that compassion for someone else, although they weren't the ones who needed it.
Yeah.
But that also goes down to that phrase, something that I learned: grief is selfish. Although we experience this from a personal level, they're grieving as well, and they require our attention. They say grief is selfish. If we was to do that, they would look at us like, "What's wrong with you? How come you can't consult me?" But the
Mhm.
problem is that they only do what they know us from, right? So
Yeah.
if you're the person that people call all the time, say, "Hey, Lisa, I got this problem going on." Like you said, you worked in the health field, so you kind of like got that nature
Yeah.
versus and nurture energy with you. So people are always calling you, "Hey, Lisa, this, Lisa, this." They want you to solve their problems, or at least give them some sort of solution. But when it came down to you, they still expected you to play that role.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that was a comfortable role for me. I'd spent
Hmm.
40 whatever years playing that role. Not playing that role, but that just my personality, right?
Right.
And I grew up in a home with a dad who, bless his heart, and in most cases, I think it's a great approach to things, but um, so his he always taught my brother and I, when you get up in the morning and you get in the shower, that's your opportunity to make a decision of how your day is going to go. If you
Right.
stub your toe on the bed and you I don't know, all these things go wrong in the morning, you choose to have a good day or a bad day. But when
Hmm.
he called it the shower decision. Every day when you get in the shower, you have, the choice to choose how your day is going to go. And so that's kind of the way I've lived my life. Glass half full, if you will.
Hmm.
But then, sometimes that doesn't apply. Like with grief, bless his heart again. Yeah, sometimes that let's just be positive approach just makes me want to choke people. Like really. I am. I'm fairly positive, if you read my blogs, if you read my book, if anything, like I do think to a certain degree, like we can either decide that we're going to sit and in pain for the rest of our lives, or we
Hmm.
can do something about it. Really.
Yes.
And truly, that is
Yes.
my approach. But there is power in being real, honest, and true about your feelings.
Mhm.
And we have to, I've said this to you, I think, when we spoke last, feeling is healing. Like, don't tell me to put my happy face on. If I'm
Right.
having a you know what kind of day, I need to have that day. That's part of my healing process.
That's very true. And
Yeah.
I totally agree. Like I'm right there with you, right? You know what I'm saying? I think the where people get it, um, where people get stuck at when we're in the deepness of our hurt, we don't know because we don't know how to express that, right? I mean, think about it, right? And I'm gonna ask this question: when the loss happened, it's such an unfamiliar thing. How do you tell someone that you're going through hell, right? Especially when you don't understand it. You just know that it's a deep pain, which is different. Like and I found this out. Child loss is different from parental loss, from sibling loss, and things like that. They all carry its own different sort of feeling,
Yeah.
depthness, right? Child loss, I found was the most deep. I still carry it with me to this day. I just
Mm,
learned how to go, no, man, I'm not okay right now.
yeah.
I'm really falling apart. I've learned how to verbalize that.
Hmm.
And I began to do research with people who have gone through child loss and things like that. And I saw a quote one time. It said, "Describe, uh, describe what it feels as if to lose a child."
Mm.
And there was the guy had a notebook, he had a pen. He looked around, thought about it for a second. He put the pen down and got up and walked away. That right there says it all, right? It's undescribable. Now, if someone was to come and say, "Hey, Lisa, what was it like when you lost your parents?" Or what was it like when you lost your friend or something like that, right? We can describe that. This sort of loss, it's understandable that we don't know how to verbalize what we're going through,
Hmm.
right? Because no one, if someone has never gone through it, so say for instance, if you and I was in the same room, knowing that we've gone through something similar,
Hmm.
we don't have to say too many words. We can just look at each other like, yeah, I know, right?
I have not endured an amputation, but that is the only thing that I can think of that would be remotely close, and only because I imagine, let's say I lost my right
Mm,
leg. I would have to learn to stand again, how I
mm,
might have to get a new job because maybe I couldn't actually do my job anymore.
mhm.
Um, it would impact my relationships. It would impact my self-worth. It would impact my mental health. There's so many things. I would have to learn how to drive a car all over again.
Mhm.
There and I just that's the only thing where I can think of that you would have to start almost at square one, learning how to re-navigate the world.
Yes.
Um, but like I say, I haven't been through that, but just what I can imagine in my head, that would be the closest thing.
We got a question in the comments. I'm gonna pop it up here. And I want to see what your thoughts are on this. So Lakaya asks, "Why is it so hard to move on after experiencing grief?"
Well,
So
I
yeah, I'm
I
gonna let
think
you answer that one.
yeah, I think there's a huge difference in moving on versus moving forward.
Mm,
To me, words are so powerful. When I hear the term moving on, I think of walking away from something.
right.
I will never, ever move on, walk away from my daughter, ever. Like, she is a part of my being. And if it meant that I had to do something, I never would. I prefer to use the words moving forward. I imagine, that grief is like a boulder, this unimaginably heavy behemoth of a boulder.
Mhm.
And it's with us for life.
Yes.
There is grief, especially after child loss. For me, it's always right here. There's
Yeah.
never a minute I forget about Katie. There's never a minute I forget that, she passed away. There's never a minute that I forget about my grief. But I think the trick is to learn how to build our life around this boulder rather, and
Mhm.
learn how to carry it, and that we carry our grief, we carry our children with us. And that's the way I imagine it, is that I'm just learning how to carry Katie with me, as crazy maybe as it sounds to some of your listeners. I feel like I've had to create sort of a new relationship with her. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
like a spiritual relationship, I guess. She's not physically here. That's another talk for another day. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is more to this human existence than just this life as a human. Like I always say, this thing that I live in, my body, that's just a rental, and
Yeah.
it's my
Yeah.
spirit inside. As a science person, I stand behind this statement: energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. If you think back to grade 10 biology or whenever it was, we learned how
Yes.
water could turn to steam and ice and all this. And that's kind of the way I think of our spirit too.
Mhm.
There's a physical form, a spiritual form. Anyway, that's a side note. But I think, if we can kind of think about things more as moving on and bringing them with us, that makes it a little bit easier. What are your thoughts, Tony?
Well, I love that, right? You know what I'm saying? I just have a different terminology. And again, I come from a male's point of view. When I think about that statement, I'm in agreement. You know what I'm saying? There's no moving on,
Mm-mm.
right? There's no pushing through or anything like that because life has changed. You're not going to move on. But
Right.
I did come up with a different terminology that worked for me. And there's something that I heard in a motivational. And the guy said, "You will grow through what you go through."
Yes.
And when I thought about that, when it came down to the loss, I realized that I had to reinvent myself.
Mhm.
So, like a child learning how to walk all over, learning how to walk, we fall down, we fail, we get back up, and we keep trying until we get it over again. And throughout life, we grow through these different versions of ourselves. As we go through grief, we grow through different versions of ourselves as we move through it, right? We grow because at
Mhm.
the end we're not the same anymore.
Nope.
Life is not the same anymore. So we have a different perception of life where our reality has changed. And so therefore we have to grow into the person that we need in order to live in the world that we now are in.
Yeah.
So the Tony that I was before my son passed away, after, when my son passed, before he passed away, when he passed away, and after passed away are not the same.
No.
Because for one, I had to become emotionally intelligent after that. I had to become a little bit more braver in my approach in life, just to have that strength to be able to tell people I'm not. I had to become a lot more vulnerable because I didn't want people to guess about what was going on with me.
Mhm.
I wanted to be able to express it in a way um, to help them understand how to show up with me. I never wanted anybody to assume that this is the way that they need me to show up for Tony. No, this is the way I need you to show up with me,
I think
right?
that's a really important point that you brought up, actually. And it's so hard when we're grieving. But I think at some point in our journey, we become the teachers, all of us,
Yes,
and we
yes,
have to, because honestly, I reflect back, like you said, to old Lisa before Katie died. And, like I say, I thought I knew a thing or two about grief. I actually knew this much.
yeah,
And so I think, okay, I am quite sure that I inadvertently said some dumb things to people. I'm quite sure. But we
Oh
can
yeah.
we can take what we've learned and we can share it with other people. I mean, I was just doing a talk actually just yesterday, and it was all about anger, actually. And, as I think we have every right in the world to be angry. I mean, the most unfair thing has happened to us.
Mhm.
But the lashing out that happens, and I'm guilty, I did it a time or two. We need people in our lives more than ever. And I think people will be patient with us to a degree. But you think of yourself, like even if somebody is really, really hurt and they lash out at you and, kind of rip you a new one, it's human nature that we kind of back up, take a step back, and we're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna let them be. Um, but I do think that if we can find that space of calm, and now I will do that. God didn't need another angel. And that I don't love that sentiment. It might be better if you said this, or in fact, in the appendix of my book, I wrote an entire section on do's and don'ts, things to say and not say. But I think that there is a place where we can become the teachers as long as we can do it in a kind and gentle way.
I agree. I just want to add to that, right? We do become the teachers, but we're also students because our grief is constantly
Oh yeah.
teaching us, right?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And like you said, you touched on something. Having, although they're not here in the physical realm, I too have that relationship with my son and all of those who have passed with me, because I'm a firm believer. The spirit never left, right? This the
Mhm.
only the flesh. We're grieving the flesh,
Yes.
but the spirit is always there, and I feel that presence. And I think
Mhm.
that's what keeps us going, because in a strange way, we still know that they're there watching over us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They're just a little bit more freer than we are. They have no earthly bounds or restrictions. So
Mhm.
they go and they explore the world the way that we won't be able to experience until we leave this place.
Right.
Um, and then, as we begin to learn, grief has a strange way of coming back, like you said, zero, and it becomes a mentor, because the selfishness of the grief is also the blessing of the grief. And what I mean by that, when it has you by itself, in those moments where you're tired, you're drained, you got nothing else left in you, grief will sit you down and say, hey, now that I have your attention, let's go through A, B, C, D, E, and F. Let's dissect this. Let's learn from these things. And when it's done, it'll let you go, right? And you come back just a little bit more knowledgeable
Mhm.
than you did in the moment before. Yeah, and another thing I learned how to do was chunk my days up into moments. And I've
Mm.
said this, and I tell people this all the time. I don't have bad days anymore. I have challenging moments,
Yes.
right? And so
Mhm.
in those challenging moments, I've learned to extract the information and let that moment pass like the wind, and I step into the next one.
Yeah.
And those who come into that moment, I realize that I carry that information for them.
Mhm.
And once that moment is gone and I'm in that moment, you know what I'm saying, in this past, I let that too pass. So I've learned how to do that throughout my days,
Yeah.
right? And that's just for me. This is something that I've learned and I've been working at it. I was like, whoa, this is really okay. I get it now, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but of course, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. And this is coming from a male's point of view. So now, from how did your husband react to that, the loss? I've always been, because men, we do things a little bit different, right? We're a little bit more aggressive, and I find that in some cases there are some men out there who are a little bit more open with their feelings, right? But for the
Mhm.
most part, as a masculine nature, we are a little bit more aggressive, more shut off, more, hey,
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't want to talk about this type
Yeah, you
person.
nailed that. Nailed it. Um, you know, I've said this a hundred times, but For two people who love each other, who got married, who've been married now for almost 30 years. At the time, it was almost 25. But agreed on just about everything: child rearing, finances, everything. Like really on the same page with everything. Never, ever, ever have had a big major blowout fight. Bickering and all those normal things, but nothing. And yet it amazed me that two humans who were so compatible in so many ways could grieve so differently.
Mhm.
Um, I would say we're both more introverted. I say I ride the fence. I'm either an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert. I'm not sure, but I do tend to be a little bit more outgoing than my husband.
Mhm.
Not to paint all pharmacists with the same brush, but he's a pharmacist by trade. He thinks in spreadsheets. He's like a very quiet thinker and
Mm.
processes things by being quiet. And I found that after Katie died, while I do love my solitude and I do love my alone time, that is how I charge my batteries, but I needed to talk about Katie, and I am a project person. I've always been a project person even before Katie died.
Mhm.
And I needed to do things like I think in the first year we created a scholarship. We had a bench at her high school. We planted a tree. I created a dress drive for, grade 12 grads who couldn't afford fancy dresses for graduations and proms. We started that at her high school. Like the list goes on and on and on. And I was just
Right.
constantly doing these things. Like this was my therapy. I also was the one who took 10 months off of work. I mean, I had been working in my job at the hospital forever. And, count my lucky stars, I don't get sick. So I had all this sick time banked. And I thought, well, geez, like, what a better time to take this. And I kind of also in my head had this image of me holding on to my son and holding on to my husband, just in absolute fear of anything happening to them.
Right.
So I became like the master of their lives. I probably did become that person, honestly. Like I think my intention was to try and make things easy for them. So I took care of the home front. I made sure that nobody ever had to go to the grocery store. There was always groceries. There was always a home cooked meal on the table. The grass was cut. How can I make everybody's life easier? And overparented my son. Honestly, looking back now, probably didn't do him any favors, but woke him up in the morning, made him breakfast, made his lunch, drove him to school, picked him up, did all the things. But that was me. I'm a doer, right?
Mhm.
And my husband would go to work. So I'd been home all day alone, doing things, but alone. And he'd walk in the door and the poor guy'd be in his face, I'm going to do this project and blah, 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 blah. And I would literally get the hand. He
Mm.
did not want to talk. I mean, granted, early on, probably 3 weeks after we lost Katie, he was back at work. Not only is he a pharmacist, but he's the director of the entire province where I live, cancer care. So I joke and say that he is the biggest drug dealer in the province because his chemotherapy budget, like he buys the legit drugs for cancer care. They're really expensive. But, and interacting with docs all day, and he's got a pretty heavy job. And I can imagine that, on a good day, that's probably exhausting. But he would come home, he would retreat to the family room in the basement, watch sports, and I wouldn't get more than about 3 words. And if you would have asked me at the 6-month mark if we were going to make it, if our marriage would survive, I would have said no. In the midst of all this, just to make it all the much harder, our then 15-year-old son was making a lot of bad decisions, running with all the bad kids, doing all the bad things. And that was an enormous pressure and an enormous strain. And again, I am there's nothing about our situations that we can fix at all. And I'm not trying to say that, but I am a fixer by nature. Like if there's a problem, if my hip hurts, I want to find the problem so I can fix it. If,
Right.
if there's a crack in my wall, I want to fix it. That's just who I am. And I wanted to do what I could to help my son. And I could see that this was going really bad, really fast. But
Mhm.
my husband had these blinders on, like just like you see a racehorse, blinders. And I would stay up till all hours of the night, and I would actually catch myself holding my breath until my son came home at night. And then it was kind of that big, and it was when I realized I was holding my breath. But you can imagine how tired a person gets waiting up till, 3, 4, whatever in the morning, and then having to get up the next day. So I remember there was a time when I just said to my husband, "Can you wait up for him tonight?" "Yep, yep, yep, I'll wait." And before I know it, he's back in bed. And I said, "Well, aren't you going to wait up?" "He's fine. He's fine." And then, so guess who's waiting up? And then I hear my son come home. And I said, "Can you go check on him and just see how he is?" Because, like I say, the only grief tool he had in his tool belt at that point was pot. Massive amounts of pot. And I said, "Can you go see?" I mean, I can kind of laugh about it now because he's on a completely different path. He's good now, but can you go check on him? And he comes back, my husband, he's fine. So I go out to the kitchen to legitimately get a glass of water. And my kid's pupils are as dilated as can be, and he's, fumbling and mumbling on his words, and he's not fine. But this was my husband's choice, was to not see this stuff. Like, literally had his head buried in the sand like an ostrich, which made me so freaking mad. So freaking mad. Um, and I think that was probably the hardest thing for our marriage to endure was, first of all, we're not on the same. Now, we both loved Katie just the same. We both, grieved her just the same. It was just the expression of our grief that was very different. And I remember telling him, "I have one son here who's alive, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that he stays safe. And if the two of us need to go, rent a basement suite somewhere and live on beanbag furniture, that's what we're going to do. So you're either going to, get in here and help me, or I'm getting out." And yeah, it was a journey. It was a journey. Was there a point that it ever got better? I don't, yeah. I mean, we're together. Our marriage is stronger than ever. But I don't know if I can define that point. I mean, it definitely got better when my son, he straightened himself out. I mean, I can say I did this or I did that, but I mean, it was all his decision. But it took, I would say, a year and a half to 2 years of pure hell. Pure hell. That is the only way that I can describe that time in my life. And I
Right.
remember yelling at God, coming home with a bag of groceries in each hand after I dropped my son at high school and we were in the midst of it, and literally throwing those groceries on the floor, like throwing them, and just using all the bad words and swearing at God, "Are you freaking kidding me? Really? Like, really? You're gonna give me both of these things to deal with right now at the same time?" I've got a child who's dead and a child who's acting as if he wants to be dead. But once he kinda got himself sorted around and, you do some healing in there even though you don't think you're doing some healing, but we
Mhm.
did. And I was going for therapy, and I'd also found a wonderful, group of women, mothers who had lost children, and it was just such a great space for me, to unload to them. Because maybe they didn't have a son that was doing all this stuff, but, between their experiences, I just felt like I could talk to somebody.
Right.
And I think over time, it was just like we grew apart as far as 2 humans can be, and then it was just this slow coming back together. And just even, I remember lots of times we both had different ways of saying it, but just saying to one another, "I love you, and I'm sorry I can't be a better support for you right now. I'm doing my best."
Okay.
And those were the only words that we had for each other,
Yeah.
but it was
And
enough.
yeah, I was gonna say that and that's enough, right? And you touched on everything, man. Such an amazing journey, such an inspiring individual. I can't praise it enough, right? Because every time I hear this, it just gives me the courage to keep going one more day, right?
Yeah.
But it also lets me know that there's hope because every time I talk to someone and you know, it's a couple, spouses, no matter what it is, right? And you've experienced it. I've heard the horror stories.
Mhm.
I have heard the horror stories where they don't make it, but also hear the other side of it where, hey, we may not have made it here, but they come back together as co-parents or as friends,
Yeah.
things like that. Like I said, I got my own horror story, right? Me and my son's mother, I thought that hey, we just experienced the same thing. Unfortunately, mine still wasn't like that, right?
Mm.
Uh, of course, when you're dealing with a narcissist, and I'm confident in calling her that now. I realized that the loss just made her more of a victim.
Mm. Mhm.
So it was no longer about the loss of our child. It was about her.
Her pain.
Yeah, her pain, right?
Yeah.
And then so I'm thinking to myself, like we both experienced it. Let's support each other, things like that.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I've never I've never had someone beat me down the way that they did, even after experiencing such a loss.
Mm.
But I think I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for it because what it did, it it helped me become a little bit more com- compassionate to others,
Yeah.
uh, and have a better understanding of that sort of grief. And it was a term that was used that's I really feel is really true. That sort of grief can kill people.
Yeah.
It can kill you because
Mhm.
we come this close. Although we lose ourselves in some sort of way, form, or fashion, it only takes but a little bit of tip across the edge before it becomes a more physical thing.
Oh, definitely. I think
Yeah,
there's lots and lots of studies and science behind that too that backs that exact thing up.
yeah. Uh, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this thing up. Lisa, thank you for coming on the show, sharing and just having this beautiful conversation with me. I learned so much. Um, how can people find you, and where can people find your book?
Best place, is Amazon for my book, and honestly, there's a million and one books. I would put my name in, so what you see there on the screen, Lisa K,
Mhm.
and it's Boehm, Boehm, and, find me on Instagram. You can find me Grief Support for Moms on Instagram, and, yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out.
Now, I always ask my guests this before you get off. If you had any words to leave the audience right now, what would you give them?
Mm. I think there is something called the power of human connection,
Mhm.
and we were never meant to walk this road alone. Reach out, find somebody who's going through something the same as you or similar to you. There is power in sharing your story with other people.
That is beautiful. That is so beautiful. Lisa, again, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for coming on and talking about such a hard subject. And as always, so amazing, so amazing. Love having this conversation. We have to do it again. We definitely have to do it again. I'm definitely going to have to check out the book as well. Before we get off, what is the name of the book?
It is called Journey to Healing: A Mother's Guide to Navigating Child Loss. Now, I've been told by my husband and my family, "Why did you write it just for grieving moms? This is applicable to everybody going through loss." And I said, "Well, I'm a mom and that's my perspective." So, I think, even as a dad or, somebody else, there's a lot of relatable stuff in there.
Yeah, definitely going to have to pick that up. I may have to send it to you. Like, can you sign this for me?
100%. You betcha.
All right. Well, Lisa, again, thank you for being on the show. For everyone else who have tuned in, hopefully you guys learned something. Micaiah, I'm sorry I didn't get to your last question, but yes, to answer it very briefly, there are times where people say things to you that they either let you know that they're there for you or let you know that they're not there for you.
Mhm.
But everybody is going to experience those losses in a more in their own personal way, and the key to it is not to take it personal.
Yeah.
Right. It's not personal. People just don't know how to express it. So having a little bit of patience with yourself and with those individuals is key to it. Now, if everyone else has made it to the end and you like these conversations, do me a favor. If you haven't already, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. But if you know anyone who could benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this with them. And Lisa's information will be down in the description below. Please reach out to her. Go check out her book, especially if you're someone struggling with child loss coming from a mom's point of view. I think it's going to be beneficial for you. And for those men who are curious, please go over there and check it out as well. I am Tony Lynch, and this is going to conclude another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Until next time, we love you guys. Thank you for your support. Peace. See you in the next one.